Hello, welcome to the Hunting Unicorns Project. My name is Damian Shipley Marshall, and this is going to be our second major news update. So I wanted to put this out there because it may look like there hasn't been a lot happening with the site. There actually has been quite a bit happening behind the scenes. When we initially started this project, which was about 3 months ago now, we had about 2 months of pulling everything together. It was very labor intensive, and we were kind of reflecting on our processes, and we were realizing that there was, going to have to be some changes moving forward. But we really didn't have a lot of time to actually sit down and reevaluate what we had done and what we were doing to make sure that we were going in a positive direction. And as this is part of my coursework for the Royal College of Art, for the master's program at Digital Directions. Once I had managed to get everything pulled together that we had done for those 2 months and presented it, it provided us with a good opportunity to reflect and do some self-evaluation, listen to some feedback so that we could move forward in a more positive direction. So I just kind of want to talk about some of the updates. There's going to be some practical stuff, and there's going to be some updates on the mission. As is often the case with a lot of these sort of projects, things did not exactly go the way we thought they would. When we originally started, we of course had the idea of putting together a documentary in which there would be some historical research, there would be some social research, and then there would also be interviewing people to relate their experiences of growing up in a fundamentalist Christian community. We knew that there were going to, a lot of these stories were not going to be positive, that it could potentially be traumatic. And we also knew that there was a possible repercussions from their community for speaking out. So we started working with the metahuman creation with Epic Games so that we could pair it with the live link face. Because my big thing was I definitely did want to protect their identity, but I did not want to remove the ownership of the story from them. And this seemed like a really elegant solution to do it. And originally, I thought, the metahuman creator was going to be kind of fun. It was a little bit like making a video game character. And we would go through some heavy stuff as we relived some of the personal trauma. And then they would perform it, which might also be a little triggering. So we were a bit cautious around that. And then they would hear it back. And there would just be this massive catharsis. We'd get the story out. The person would feel positive about the experience. And everything would be great. And as it turns out, things were a little bit more complicated as we started working with some of these programs. I think the first thing that really made me kind of question whether or not we were using the right process for the metahuman creation was when we were working with one of our participants. They were creating their character, and when we were all finished, they kind of made this remark of, well, that's me, but it's very cleaned up me. And they sort of laughed it off. They were fine with it, but I was kind of thinking, all right, well, if they're feeling as though they had been cleaned up, well, who did the cleaning? And what are we defining by cleaned up? So when you're working with creating a digital representation of somebody, you want to make sure that digital representation is something that works for them. And it's not to say that they maybe don't want to be cleaned up a little bit. But the cleaning up seemed a little unintentional. So I was very concerned about the possibility that there was kind of a hidden narrative going on as we were creating these characters. There was also an additional sort of problem. At the time, we didn't necessarily, we knew we wanted to alter and customize the metahumans with some stuff that we were doing in Blender. We drew a lot of inspiration from the medieval tapestry set, The Hunt of the Unicorns, which kind of sparked the imagery for this entire project, but we also felt that that might be a little bit limiting, and we were still kind of conforming people to look a certain way with the stuff that we were putting forward, and we increased the possibility of symbolism. We said that other people could add their own symbolism, and we also started opening things up to where people could potentially talk to me about adding some more custom assets as we started working out the character, which I was happy to do. I think that's very important to do. But it was also very labor intensive. And if Hunting Unicorns eventually evolves the way that we want it to, there's going to be there's going to have to be this balance that we strike. If we have a lot of people who are asking for a lot of custom modifications to their characters, I'm the only one who's working on this. I'm kind of happy to do it. In truth, I kind of like doing that. I like character creation. That's kind of my major thing with storytelling. But of course, if we've got multiple people that we're working with at once, that's going to very drastically increase production time. So yeah, there kind of became this balance of, this is a really good process because of that live link face. Like I said, controlling the animation is major, but is this technology actually giving the freedom and the representation that we want it to? There was also some technical issues because as we started talking to people, actually the body became much more important to the design. We had people that wanted to display tattoos, and not necessarily on their necks and face. They actually wanted them on, arms, chests, that sort of thing. So we had to start incorporating the body, and I had to figure out how we were going to start making the body actually work with the Live Link Face app, because there's a very notorious issue that Live Link Face data separates the body very noticeably. It separates the head from the body very noticeably, so you have the floating head issue. So I had to work out how we were going to tackle that, because the unfortunate, to get into some of the technical things, once you can join the head to the body, but the body drives the neck animations, which is very much a part of how people speak. So if we lose this, and they're just sitting there moving their mouth like this, it starts to look very unnatural and very uneasy. So yeah, there was some technical stuff that we had to work out around that. On the note of props and things being customized within the models, this was also, causing participants to have a little bit of discomfort, because just that process kind of brought up memories that they weren't really prepared to deal with. And some of them were quite surprised that the process was affecting them the way it did. But, there's been a couple of times where we've had to say, okay, well, it's probably best if we do the character design, take a break, sort of relax, and we'll pick it back up again, which of course, not that we're complaining about this, but it does increase production time, and it decreases our ability to have things done by a certain point, because we're trying to make sure we're giving space to the participants. But so the whole character creation process, I was very surprised that this was being a little bit more profound than we originally thought. The other thing that I was a little concerned about as we started working with this, and this has come from feedback from other places, is if our goal is to give an individual as much creative control as they can over the telling of this story, which I think is really important, seeing as how we're using the Live Link Face, and like I said, this is an impressive piece of kit. It allows the person to take control on how they're delivering the story. But at the same time, because you have to use it with the metahuman control rig, which is typically used with the metahumans, obviously, it does kind of limit them to working with a very sort of human-centric sort of virtual actor, an avatar, if you will. And, what if a person doesn't want to do that? I've seen some people do some really great things with making more stylistic kind of things with the metahuman rig, but it does require a lot more technical know-how that I would have to get familiar with. And apparently also in some cases it requires a program that's about, like $140, and requires a new set of skills to really start looking into how you can turn these models, how you convert a lot of these models to work with a metahuman rig. So the long and short of it was, if we really want people to get creative and expressive with their virtual actors, which I really want them to do, I really want them to have that ability, it's going to require a lot more technical know-how and, of course, a lot more production time. And we're kind of wondering if this process really accommodates everybody's tastes who we might want to work with. So the question then becomes, how can we accommodate for everyone's personal aesthetic choices and make something that works well within a video format that can still tell a story? Which is what's led us to explore some possibilities that we might be able to have with generative AI. And I know right now generative AI is a very sort of hot topic with a lot of very differing opinions on whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing. We're approaching this from the standpoint that artistic expression, if you kind of look at how public schools have limited access to children being able to express themselves creatively, and yet how it's still very much a part of the curriculum in, say, a charter school or a private school, learning how to express yourself in the creative field has become something of a privilege. And we're kind of thinking that for people who have not been given a lot of opportunity to learn expressive methods in art, this might be kind of used as almost sort of a creative prosthetic, something that can kind of ease them into the process, but also something that can be used to make these customizable figures in these stories come to life. Because using a lot of AI programs online, you can animate things, you can even get things to lip sync to certain videos. It's very impressive to see what can be done, particularly in a matter of moments, whereas most of these animation processes, take a very long period of time, more time than we've actually got to potentially work with each person individually. And again, we're kind of trying to think ahead of when, hunting unicorns is kind of operating at the speed and at the quantity that we want it to. So we're going to be looking into the possibility of using AI. There's going to be that second tutorial series that's coming out. And yeah, so keep your eyes open for that. We are going to be exploring it. And it's not that we're abandoning the metahuman pipeline, because I actually still prefer that as a storytelling medium. But we also do want to make sure that we're adhering to all of our goals of giving people complete creative control on how their story is presented. So those were all the things that we discovered just in getting people to create the characters. Writing and performing the stories, we knew that was going to be difficult. I don't think we were quite prepared for how difficult that could be in some circumstances. And there was also a case of listening to the story played back. We had a person, they had submitted a story for performing, we revealed it to them, and they made a comment in their exit survey. When I was handing that story in, I felt maybe I was making a big deal out of nothing, that it almost felt trivial when I wrote it and talked about myself. But when I saw it performed back to me, even though I kind of understood that was me, it was different enough to where I could still feel sympathy for that person. And, that was uncomfortable for them to realize, that they could have, sympathy for somebody telling exactly the same story, but not sympathy for themselves. So that was something where we had to talk and make sure that we created a supportive network while that person was going through that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think the upshot is we needed to put a lot more protections in place. And we've been talking to people of how we could potentially do that. And right now I've got about 3 different videos going on at once. So it should be up by the time I put this update out there. But fundamentally, there is going to be a video that kind of takes you through the whole process of working with us in creating your story. So even if you're working a lot with the AI generative stuff, we still want to make sure that there's a human element. You need to talk to us first. We will set up we will send you a consent form to sign. That is partially so that we have permission to use your material, but it's also so you understand what protections we can give you in this. Because to be clear, you are pretty much in control of this process. If you tell us, look, I need to stop for a while, and then maybe I'll come back to it, that's okay. If you eventually decide you don't want to come back to it at all, that's okay. If you say, I want you to destroy all the stuff that we've made so far because it's causing me distress, that's okay. And even if you submit a story and then you see it published publicly and you say, no, I want to take that down and I want you to destroy it, that's okay. We won't ask questions. We want to make sure that you're comfortable in relating these stories. So yeah, I think just the big thing is making sure that we're having those conversations and making sure that you communicate with us as much as you possibly can, just to make sure that we're supporting you in a way that you want. So what does this all mean and where are we going? My mother and I are very happy with the work that we've done so far, and we're happy with it continuing pretty much indefinitely. I think this project is going to be going far past what I'm doing for the Masters. The Masters is, obviously I'm going to be submitting things that I've discovered and done for my Master's work, but this is going to continue going. We've reshifted it to where we are still thinking of like future artworks that we can do with the, with the learning experience that we've gained so far in working with this procedure. And that also includes the perspective we've gained with working with other people. But we see that going on for a much longer time. We still are thinking of a documentary that we are going to collaborate on, but we feel as though we need to get a healthy collection of stories that have been submitted safely and submitted in a way that make the person who participated with us happy. And that's going to take some time. We need some time to make sure that people have time to step back and restabilize as much as they want. They can start and stop the process as much as they want. We don't want to give a deadline for that. So for the moment, we want Hunting Unicorns to be a storytelling platform, first and foremost, a way for us to artistically express what we have experienced growing up in fundamentalist communities. And that's going to help us as well. What we get out of this is perspective. Self-repression is very much a part of both of our practices. Specifically, how are people convinced to self-repress? And that's where our focus is. That's why we're interested in working with these kind of processes. And we want to continue learning more. Because my mother and I, we grew up on the outskirts of fundamentalist sort of society. We know how it affected us, but we also know that it was much more profound within those communities. So we want to be able to gain that perspective in order to continue to work. And in that, since we can't offer financial compensation, we want to at least provide this platform and this method for people to be able to express their stories and tell the world what they think they should know about them. And that's where we're at. So this is very much stage one. Stage two will come when everybody's comfortable and happy for it to progress. We don't have a hard deadline. We don't have a backer that's pushing us for a deadline. So it's all fine. As far as my stuff with the Royal College of Art, I think I said at the very beginning of this, we had the opportunity to display at Outernet. And I just wanted to give an update on that. We are indeed going to have a presence at Outernet on July the 24th. This is when the official show for the Royal College of Art, which is entitled Now, is going to be opening. It is a privated ticketed event, and we are not going to have a huge presence there. What we are going to have is a sizzle trailer, because with some of the stuff that we talked about and have been talking about with this subject so far, I don't necessarily think it's best to just plaster that over 4 gigantic screens. And besides that, I don't think it works for the platform. It's very visually based, and this is much more of a dialogue that you set up with a person who's disguising their identity. So I think that needs a much smaller, intimate space, which is why I've elected to display what work we get by January 24th at the White City campus at the Royal College of Art. And we're also going to be hoping to have a sizzle trailer featured in the BBC Television Centre as well. And yeah, that's where the first initial show is going to go. Obviously, only people who are interested in having their work displayed in that space will be displayed, and there is no obligations. But it's just going to be where I've been sharing my progress and what I've learned through this process. But that's going to be on the 24th, and the subsequent shows are going to be through the 25th and the 28th. So if you're in the London area and you're interested, you're more than welcome to come by. Just let me know. And yeah, I think that's most of the stuff that we need to consider for a news update. At this stage, the website should also be updated with the new processes and a little bit more of a succinct look at what we're doing. And that's also including a gallery and a bio page, which is going to be going on as well. And that bio page is just strictly for the people who are a part of the project who want to be identified. It's not necessary that you give out information. I think that's it. Thank you very much for listening to me ramble. I hope that answers any questions. And of course, if it does not answer any of your questions, feel free to contact us through the website. So thank you very much, and I hope to be working with you in the future.